Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. In my previous life, back in the 1980s, my older sister married a rough, simple-minded butcher, while I, Lisa, foolishly gave myself to a notorious thug feared by everyone in the village. Who could have imagined that the outlaw would later rise to power like a kite soaring in the wind? He earned piles of money and let me spend freely, allowing me to live a life of indulgent luxury. My sister, however, despised her husband's fishy stench. She grew cold toward him and eventually started a secret affair with a lazy drifter from the village. Out of love for her, I listened to my mother and tried to persuade her to stay content with her life. But when she saw me dressed in silk and living in comfort, envy burned so fiercely in her that it consumed her reason. In one careless moment, she struck me with a fatal blow. When I opened my eyes again, time had turned back to the very day the matchmaker came to discuss marriage. My sister acted faster this time, rushing to seize the opportunity and insisting she wanted to marry the thug, Brandon Lee. The entire family froze in disbelief. The matchmaker gasped, and I simply curled my lips into a faint secret smile. Brandon Lee was not a man of talent, nor a reformed wanderer. Every bit of wealth he once possessed had been built by my own hands. Could my naive sister, who had never faced the harshness of life, truly handle a man as dangerous as him? I couldn't help but wonder what her fate would become this time. "Mom, I absolutely won't marry that man, Caleb, right?" my sister shouted. "I only want Brandon Lee." No one knew where she found the courage, but she yelled it in front of everyone. "Even if he has that nasty habit of peeking at the neighbor ladies when they go to the restroom, those women aren't exactly innocent either." The whole family went silent. The matchmaker's mouth hung open. As for me, I calmly sipped my tea. None of this surprised me. It had all happened before. In my previous life, my mother adored my sister like fragile porcelain. She was determined to marry her to the wealthiest butcher in the region while treating me like an unwanted burden. She hurried to marry me off to Brandon Lee just to collect the bride price and fill my sister's dowry chest. A few worn-out quilts. That was all I received. "Sweetheart," my mother had said at the time, "I just don't want your sister to suffer. You know, Brandon seems like the kind of man who will love his wife. You'll live comfortably with him. I promise." When my sister demanded to marry Brandon Lee, my mother's face turned purple with fury as she slammed the table. "What on earth has gotten into you? Did you forget that man once tried to grope Mrs. Harris?" But my sister only sneered, pulled my mother into her room, and whispered something in her ear. I didn't know what she said, but my mother went from shocked to puzzled to strangely compliant. Though she still seemed uncertain, she eventually decided to hold both weddings together. That night, when the crows outside had gone silent, and light still glowed from my mother's room, I quietly pushed the door open. The creaking sound made her turn from her warm bed. When she saw it was me, the smile on her lips instantly faded. I told her gently to go rest, but she sighed. "I'm just worried about your sister. I'm sewing a few more wedding quilts for her. She's different from you. You know, she's sacrificing her own happiness so you can live comfortably with Caleb, right? Remember to help her later. If she's happy, you'll be happy too." I looked at the red silk quilt embroidered with dragons and phoenixes on the bed and asked quietly, "Where's mine, Mom?" She froze for a moment, her tone suddenly strange. "You're about to marry the richest butcher in the region, Lisa. What more could you possibly want? You'll live better than any landlord's wife." I turned away and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I deliberately didn't tell her that it was going to rain that night, just so she'd have to run outside and gather the cotton she'd left drying in the yard. The next morning, her cries woke me up. "Oh God, are you blind up there? My daughter's wedding is tomorrow, and all the cotton is soaked." I pulled the blanket over my head, stifling my laughter at my sister's temperament, beginning her marriage under such unlucky omens. Wasn't that just poetic justice? My sister grew irritated by the noise, threw on a coat, and opened the door to complain. "Mom, why are you crying over a few torn quilts? If you really love me, then buy me a pair of gold bracelets for my dowry." My mother suddenly stopped crying, as if struck by an idea. She slapped her own cheek and said, "Oh, how could I have been so foolish? My daughter is still the cleverest one. Yesterday, Caleb's family brought $3,000 as the bride price. That's enough to buy a 40G pair of gold bracelets. Under the blanket, my hands clenched tightly. So she used my bride price, gave me a few shabby quilts, and bought gold jewelry for Hannah, my sister. After getting dressed, Hannah glanced at me, pretending to sleep, and sneered. Sleeping like a dead pig. No wonder you're marrying that stinking butcher. You two are made for each other. Not like me. I'm about to marry the richest man in town. Lisa, you'll always be the kind of woman who can only stand there and envy me. With that, she strutted off to find Brandon Lee, eager to strengthen her bond with him. My mood, already sour, worsened. If I remembered correctly, at this moment, Brandon Lee was lying in Sophie Grant's bed. But if Hannah was so eager to marry him, then so be it. After all, a greater misfortune awaited her. Outside, the sound of firecrackers exploded through the air, the acrid smell of gunpowder drifting with the smoke. Groups of children gathered at the gate, craning their necks to peek inside, curious to see the bride. When I caught them staring, they blushed and whispered to each other. The bride is so beautiful. Her skin's as white as winter snow. My future sister-in-law, a lively girl, quickly took a handful of wedding candies from her pocket, handed them to the children, and gently shooed them away. She stepped into the room, set down a lacquered tray with gold-painted edges, and picked out a piece of cake, my favorite, offering it to me. I took it quickly, surprised by how rich and delicious it was, far better than any pastry I'd ever tasted. She couldn't hide her admiration as she ran her fingers over the intricate embroidery of my gown. This really is a $10,000 wedding dress. Every stitch, every detail. It's perfect. Worth every cent. Hearing that number, I nearly choked. She hurried to pour me some tea. I lowered my head, looking at the crumbs that had fallen onto my white dress, feeling a pang of distress. The dress is so expensive, I murmured. If I stain it, will your brother be angry with me? She blinked in surprise, then laughed. My brother? He'd be thrilled, not angry. How could he ever scold you? Her words struck something deep within me. I suddenly remembered my past life. Hannah's wedding dress had been a red gown borrowed from a villager. Compared to this flawless white dress tailored just for me, the difference was like heaven and earth. My sister-in-law continued. When the matchmaker came to discuss the marriage, my brother secretly asked me to take your measurements so he could order this dress from the city. He wanted it made especially for you. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to say. 1,000 questions crowded in my mind. My gaze dropped to the piece of cake in my hand. She grinned playfully and added, that cake too. He knows you like sweets, so he had it brought all the way from the city just for you. My lips trembled slightly. A warmth bloomed in my chest, and I found myself longing to see the groom right then. Could it be that in my past life, when Brandon Lee had been kind to me, not only sharing food but also quietly supporting me when I dreamed of moving to the city, it wasn't because he liked my sister at all? Maybe from beginning to end, the only person he had ever truly loved was me. Meanwhile, Hannah, slender and graceful, slipped into a red wedding gown that was already years out of fashion. Yet somehow she still managed to look radiant, like a spring blossom in full bloom. From the moment she appeared before Brandon Lee, his gaze had never left her. Hannah lifted her chin proudly, standing tall like a magnificent phoenix. The villagers couldn't stop showering Brandon Lee with praise for marrying such a beautiful woman. Compliments filled the air. Words my sister Hannah had never heard once in her entire 18 years of life. For a moment, she truly believed she had reached the peak of her glory. But the moment Lisa, stepped outside, all the admiration shifted toward me. It was the 1990s. Life in the countryside was still simple and poor. Most people only knew of the outside world through traveling film shows. The newlywed brides from the village couldn't help whispering among themselves, their eyes wide as they stared at me. Wow, Lisa, that dress you're wearing, is that a wedding gown? My God, it's gorgeous. Caleb really knows how to treat his wife, doesn't he? He even rented such an expensive dress for you. Across from me, Hannah clenched her teeth so tightly I could hear the grinding. She remembered perfectly well that in her previous life, she had also worn a red wedding gown. And now how could I, the one she used to look down on, be the one wearing a pure white bridal dress? How was I worthy of it? Her voice dripped with venom as she snapped. Lisa, you better be careful with that gown. If you ruin it, Caleb might get angry and call off the wedding. Hearing her sharp tone, I couldn't help but laugh coldly. Oh, didn't Brandon Lee rent you a wedding gown? Or was it that he couldn't afford one? Maybe all his money went into paying compensation to those women he got caught spying on. Hannah's face turned beet red. Her neck flushed with fury. I covered my mouth to hide my grin, satisfaction blooming in my chest. She spat out through clenched teeth. What are you laughing at? If I hadn't given up that wedding, it never would have been your turn. I tilted my head and said sweetly, Sister, whoever said I wanted to marry you? Before I could say another word, a deep, calm voice came from behind me. It was Caleb, right? When I turned around, I froze. Caleb stood there in a white suit, elegant and refined, looking like a movie star stepped out of a screen. The young girls nearby couldn't take their eyes off him, whispering enviously, wondering why fate hadn't given them such luck. Caleb gently wrapped his arm around my shoulders and turned with me to face Hannah. You'd better tell me who said that nonsense, he said quietly. I'll make sure they're put in their place. Who in their right mind would give up a pearl for a pebble? People might think I'm blind. And for the record, he added firmly, my family isn't poor enough to rent a wedding dress. I bought this one myself. Even if Lisa wanted to burn it, I'd still be happy at that. The onlookers' expressions changed instantly. Their gazes toward me were full of admiration and envy. Lisa's so lucky, someone murmured. She's marrying a rich man like Caleb. She'll never have to worry about food again. Even their dog's going to live better than most of us. Hannah's face turned from red to yellow to pale white with rage. Pretending to gag, she covered her nose and scoffed. It's not like I wanted to marry you anyway. Who'd want a man that smells like pigs? I tilted my head slightly and inhaled. Only the faint scent of soap lingered. Caleb's younger sister glared at Hannah, furious. Don't talk nonsense. My brother hasn't gone near the pig farm for days. He asked someone else to take care of it because he didn't want to smell like that at the wedding. He even used 3 whole bars of soap just to make sure he wouldn't disgust his bride. Hannah's face changed color again, her lips trembling. That's impossible. I smirked and met her gaze. It's not impossible. It's just the truth. People of value always try to do their best, but those without value, they don't deserve to be respected in the first place. Hannah's jaw tightened, her words stuck in her throat. I slipped my arm through Caleb's, smiling gracefully as we went around to toast the villagers. As I glanced back, I caught sight of Hannah chugging her drink, her expression stormy. A thought crossed my mind. The real drama is only beginning. By the time the wedding feast was halfway through, everyone was happily full. Every dish on the tables had meat. Braised pork, steamed pork, stewed pork, stir-fried pork, sweet, sour, spicy, and savory. The abundance of it all nearly made my head spin. I was afraid that Caleb might have already spent his entire fortune. His face was flushed from the wine, his eyes soft and full of affection as he looked at me. As long as you're happy, he said tenderly, nothing else matters. I gave him a playful smile. So, it's only me who gets to be happy, huh? What about you? He hesitated for a moment, then laughed. No, you make me the happiest man alive. Just as we sat down together, my mother's sharp, scolding voice rang out from outside the door. My heart leapt with anticipation as I glanced toward the noise. Standing there was Sophie Grant, Brandon Lee's lover. Sophie's eyes shimmered with tears as she looked at Brandon, her pitiful expression making his face twist in guilt. Then, clutching her stomach, she dropped to her knees in front of Hannah. I don't want to make things difficult for Brandon, she said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. But while I can bear the pain, the baby inside me can't. The crowd gasped in shock. His child was hers. Hannah went pale and fainted straight into my mother's arms. Within minutes, gossip about the scandal spread like wildfire. Everyone soon knew that the groom had gotten a widow pregnant and ruined both weddings in one day. My mother panicked, terrified that things would get out of control. She secretly handed Sophie the pair of gold bracelets she had meant to give Hannah, and told her to go to the city to end the pregnancy. When Hannah finally regained consciousness and heard the news, her expression was unreadable. Neither joy nor despair. She didn't lash out at our mother, nor did she storm off to confront Brandon. Instead, she behaved as if she had suddenly become the perfect, obedient wife. Quiet, dutiful, and gentle. She cooked and cleaned every day, waiting patiently for Brandon to come home for dinner. Afterward, she would head out to the fields with a hoe over her shoulder, working until dark. The village women who passed by whispered among themselves, "Has Hannah gone crazy or something?" She used to make Lisa clean the table for her when they lived together, and now she's not only willing to marry a thug like Brandon Lee, she's actually working for him like a servant. Another woman said, "Well, that's Hannah for you. Always talking big about how Brandon will make a fortune one day. Acting all high and mighty like she's better than everyone else." Hannah overheard their gossip but didn't seem to care. She puffed out her chest and held her head high, strutting like a proud goose. A few days later, I heard that she was running all over town trying to borrow money for Brandon's new business venture in the city. Some people refused outright and didn't even bother to hide their disdain. One woman sneered, "What nonsense! That husband of yours is useless. If you give him money, he'll just end up in jail. You must be blind and stupid too. Now get out of here and stop corrupting my kids." As she spoke, the woman angrily grabbed a basin of dirty wash water and flung it at Hannah. Drenched and humiliated, Hannah failed to borrow a single cent. But she only muttered to herself as she trudged home. A devoted wife shares her husband's hardships. In return, he'll give her all the gold in the world. If I can just endure this for now, once Brandon gets rich, all his money will be mine to manage. The next morning, my sister-in-law and Nina Wright opened the door and froze. My mother and Hannah were standing outside together. "What are you two doing here so early?" Na asked wearily. Hannah ignored her completely, pulling my mother straight into my room. Na tried to stop her, but Hannah had already thrown open my curtains. Half awake, I sat up abruptly and yanked the blanket to my chest, glaring at her. "What are you doing here at this hour? Could it be that the widow Sophie has taken over your bed, and now you've come to pick a fight with me instead?" Hannah's face stiffened. "Lisa, what nonsense are you talking about? That wretched woman probably ran off with some lowlife already. Brandon's become useless because of her." Hannah snapped bitterly. Her words were so absurd that I almost laughed out loud. Brandon Lee, the kind of man who corrupted everyone he met, didn't need anyone's help to go bad. Hannah glanced around the room, noticing that Caleb wasn't there. Her eyes flickered with something that looked like pity. "Well, it makes sense," she said mockingly. "Living with a man who smells like pigs every day. If I were the one married to Caleb, I wouldn't let him sleep in my bed either." My mother sat down on the edge of my bed and grabbed my hand. "Your sister's here today to help you, honey. Your father heard that your life with Caleb hasn't been easy, so he wants to find you a better match." The two of them, mother and daughter, took turns talking like a rehearsed performance. I could barely contain my laughter. My life was perfectly fine. What exactly did I need their help with? That night, on our wedding night, Caleb turned off the lights and by the glow of the moon through the window, began to gently remove the heavy wedding gown from my body. In the soft rhythm of our breaths, I suddenly felt a warm, wet flow spreading beneath me. Startled, I pushed him away. Caleb froze, mistaking my reaction for fear. "I'm sorry," he said nervously. "I don't have much experience. Did I hurt you?" My face flushed. "No, it's not that. I think I just got my period." Now it was Caleb's turn to blush. That night, we simply held each other and slept, though neither of us rested easily. The warmth of his embrace, the faint scent of soap on his skin, it was both comforting and unsettling. I could feel his body tense against mine, struggling with restraint while my own heart raced uncontrollably. The next morning, Caleb noticed the dark circles under my eyes. Without a word, he took his blanket and went to sleep in the other room. I looked out at the courtyard glowing with lantern light and sighed helplessly. Seemed I would have to wait a little longer. Turning back to Hannah, I gave her a cold smile. "You should worry about keeping Brandon's pants on before worrying about me. Everyone in town knows how loose they are. A little breeze and they might fall right off." Hannah's face stiffened, her lips twitching with anger, but she swallowed it down, remembering she had come to ask for something. Forcing a sweet smile, she said, "Lisa, how could I ever harm my own sister? I just feel sorry for you. Married to a man who smells like pigs every day. What kind of life is that?" I stood up and adjusted my clothes, then pulled the blanket aside. Both she and my mother's eyes widened when they saw what I was wearing. A soft silk pajama set, the kind you'd only see in movies. Their faces turned green with envy. Hannah's voice trembled slightly. That outfit, wasn't it the kind from those fancy films? I nodded casually. Yes, expensive things have their reason. It feels like wearing nothing at all. My mother gasped, clutching something in her hand. When I looked closer, I realized it was a pack of sanitary pads. Lisa, what's this? She asked in confusion. I've never seen anything like it before. Hannah, having lived one lifetime already, of course recognized it. In the early 1990s, no rural women used sanitary pads. They relied on rags or bits of old clothing stuffed with cotton. She thought bitterly to herself, in my past life I married Caleb. How come I never got to wear a wedding dress like that, or use something this luxurious? Our cycles had always been close, and right then she was clearly uncomfortable with the rough fabric against her skin. Clenching her fists, she silently told herself, once Brandon makes money, I'll live as comfortably as Lisa does now. But what she didn't expect was that I was living far more comfortably than she ever could while she was left to clean up the messes Brandon caused. Hannah's nails dug deep into her palms as she dragged my mother toward the door. Even in her frustration, she was clear-headed enough to snatch the pack of pads before storming out. Just as they stepped outside, Caleb came out of the kitchen. He wore a crisp white shirt and black slacks, looking clean and composed. Hannah froze, staring at him in shock, as if she were seeing a ghost from another life. In her past life, when she had married Caleb, he was always up before dawn to tend to the pigs and came home at night reeking of filth. Now the man standing before her was so different. Calm, handsome, smelling faintly of soap instead of sweat and animals. And that difference made Hannah's chest twist with something she couldn't quite name. Even the braised ribs no longer tasted good to her. When Hannah came to her senses, she looked around my neat little yard, her eyes falling on the blooming rose bushes. The sight made her heart twist with resentment and envy. Her gaze shifted toward Caleb, burning with both anger and longing. Why couldn't he have given me a life like this? She thought bitterly. If he had been like this before, I never would have gotten involved with that other man. It's not my fault I cheated. It's Caleb's own doing. When Caleb saw Hannah and my mother standing there, the smile on his face faded halfway. Since our wedding, he'd listened to my advice and stopped doing the heavy work at the pig farm. He'd hired help for that and devoted all his time and attention to me. He was so afraid that if he neglected me, I might drift away like a breeze. Every night, he'd quietly get up several times, slip into our room just to watch me sleep peacefully for a while, and only then return to his bed contented. Caleb loved with his whole heart. Not just me but even my family. Turning to them now, he said warmly, "Why don't you stay and have lunch with us before heading home?" The rich aroma of meat filled the air, and my mother's nose twitched. She hadn't tasted meat since our wedding feast. Her feet suddenly refused to move. "Oh, that sounds wonderful. I haven't had a chance to taste my son-in-law's cooking yet." Hannah, seeing that our mother wasn't planning to leave, reluctantly stayed as well. By then, my sister-in-law, had finished sweeping the fallen leaves in the yard. She washed her hands clean and went to fetch bowls of sweet corn and sweet potato porridge, simmered until soft and golden. Caleb brought out dishes of tender pork ribs braised in soy sauce and stir-fried pork with leeks, both steaming and fragrant. The savory scent filled the courtyard, even making the neighbor's yellow dog whine and wag its tail. Hannah rubbed her empty stomach. Ever since she'd married Brandon Lee, she'd only managed to eat one proper breakfast, always at our mother's house. Now she devoured 2 full bowls of porridge, her belly round like a balloon before reluctantly putting down the spoon. At that moment, Caleb was peeling shrimp carefully for me, his movements gentle and focused. Hannah stared at him, utterly stunned. "Where on earth did you get shrimp?" she blurted out. Still holding a grudge against Hannah for mocking her brother's pig smell before, shot back with a smirk. "Didn't I tell you? My sister-in-law married into this house to enjoy life. She's not feeling well lately, so my brother went to the city and bought a whole pound of fresh shrimp. He's keeping them alive in a tank so she can have some anytime she wants." My mother, hearing that I was living such a comfortable life, tugged on Hannah's sleeve and whispered, "Looks like Lisa won't be listening to us anymore or picking fights with Caleb either." I bit into the sweet, buttery shrimp and glanced at Hannah. I couldn't help wondering what she was thinking. Probably about where her so-called future tycoon of a husband was off fooling around today. As they got ready to leave, Hannah still couldn't resist a jab. Don't get too smug, Lisa. So, what if your husband's a little better than mine right now? Just wait a few years. Brandon's bound to make a fortune. When that happens, I'll be a queen, and you'll still be married to a pig farmer. My mother chimed in, siding with her as always. You two are sisters. If your brother-in-law gets rich, you'll benefit too. Why don't you lend your sister $30,000? That way, Brandon can start his business in the city. Once he makes money, he'll surely repay your kindness. I crossed my arms and rolled my eyes. Please. My brother-in-law is so ambitious. He wouldn't want money from a pig farmer's wife anyway. Hannah opened her mouth to argue, but I slammed the door shut before she could say another word. A few days later, I brought out a bowl of roasted sunflower seeds and sat by the roadside listening to the village women gossip. Lisa, one of them called out, your brother-in-law went to the city to start a business, didn't he? Why didn't you tell Caleb to go with him? Mrs. Mack, the nosiest woman in town, grabbed a handful of my sunflower seeds as the others chuckled and teased. I smiled faintly and replied, didn't my sister say it herself? My brother-in-law was born to be successful. This little village is too small for him. As for Caleb and me, we just got married. We're not interested in chasing the crowd. Mr. Duane, the kind old man who lived nearby, spoke up to defend us. That's right. Caleb's a good man. He raised his sister all by himself, worked hard his whole life. He's a good man, a rare kind of man, said Mr. Duane, shaking his head fondly. Even if Caleb doesn't go to the city to make money, he'll still live well here. Not long after, I saw my sister Hannah walking down the road with a hose slung over her shoulder. Mrs. Mack shouted across the street. Hey Hannah, why didn't you go to the city with your husband? Wiping the sweat from her forehead, Hannah squinted against the bright sunlight. Business is a man's job, she said with a forced smile. I just need to stay home and take care of things for him. It had only been a few days, but I was startled by how much she'd changed. Her once fair skin was now tanned and rough. Her face looked older, and faint wrinkles had already begun to form around her eyes. When her gaze met mine, her pride quickly returned. Just wait and see, she said coldly. Brandon will definitely live a better life than your pig farmer. Lisa, I almost pity you. When my husband comes back rich, you'll be begging me for help. Maybe I'll even tell him to give Caleb some odd job out of kindness. Mr. Duane bristled. Only you would think that Brandon is some kind of treasure. Caleb's 10 times the man he'll ever be. I gently tugged at his sleeve and whispered, let it go, Uncle Duane. She married Brandon. Let's just let her have that victory. The women standing nearby burst into laughter so loud they nearly bent double. Hannah's face darkened, muttering curses under her breath. She stormed off in humiliation. Just as she disappeared down the road, it was lunchtime. The delicious smell of meat drifted from my house, and Mrs. Thorne, our neighbor, couldn't help but lick her lips. Lisa, sweetheart, what are you cooking this time? It smells heavenly. All eyes turned toward me, curious and eager. I smiled modestly but couldn't resist showing off a little. Oh, nothing special. I just made some corn fritters. Caleb butchered one of our black pigs this morning. He took the freshest ribs, stewed them with golden potatoes from the garden, and added a bit of handmade noodles. The women's mouths watered as I described it, and I almost laughed when one of them actually swallowed audibly. I feigned shyness and said, but of course my sisters wouldn't want a simple life like this. Anyway, halfway down the road that afternoon, I ran into Sophie Grant, the widow. She was having her belongings loaded onto a cart. When she saw me, she looked flustered, tucking a few loose strands of hair behind her ear. I smiled warmly and walked over to take her hand. It's good you're leaving, I said softly. You should have gone long ago. In my previous life, after I married Brandon Lee, I discovered he had continued to torment Sophie, forcing her to obey him in secret. When I'd gone to see her back then, she thought I'd come to make trouble. But I hadn't. Sophie had been a woman with no family, no one to depend on, trapped in this suffocating village like a bird in a cage. The men lusted after her, the women despised her. Yet instead of condemning her, I'd shared half of my food with her and begged her to leave before it destroyed her. She never forgot that kindness. Years later, after I had rebuilt my life in the city and opened a small clothing stall, I was cornered by a gang of thugs demanding protection money. Just when I thought I'd lose everything, a woman in elegant clothes appeared, and it was Sophie. The moment the thugs saw her, their faces drained of color and they scattered like frightened rats. Only then did I learn who she truly was. She had been the daughter of a wealthy family in the city, kidnapped when she was a child. Her parents had searched for her for years without ever giving up. Without her help that day, I would have been ruined. But Sophie didn't just save me. She made sure Brandon Lee faced justice. She helped me file for divorce, then reported him to the police. He was sentenced to several years in prison. While there, he was beaten and abused until he came out looking 20 years older. When Sophie finally saw him again, she felt her anger dissolve, letting him go back to the countryside to fend for himself. She said it was the only way she could truly forgive herself. I never imagined that he would later return, boasting to everyone about his success in the city, lying about all the money he had made, and convincing my sister to believe him. So when I woke up in this new life, the first thing I did was find Sophie. I spoke gently, asking for her help with one small thing: to crash that cursed wedding. I also urged her to go to the city and find her real parents. I hope you'll be reunited with your family soon, I told Sophie Grant softly. Her eyes welled up with tears as she clasped my hands. If it weren't for you showing me this path, she whispered, I'd still be drowning in that same pit of misery. Then she reached into her pocket and carefully took out a small bundle wrapped in red cloth. When she unfolded it, a pair of gold bracelets gleamed in the sunlight. These belong to you, she said gently. I should return them. I quickly caught her hands and looked around to make sure no one was nearby before sighing in relief. Sophie, you'll need money once you get to the city. Please keep them. Think of them as a gift from me. She looked at me in disbelief. I can't possibly accept that. These are worth so much. If you hadn't told me to pretend I was pregnant to stir things up, I never would have gotten them. I waved her concern away with a smile. Don't worry about it. In my past life I had so much wealth, I needed a whole house just to store all my jewelry and clothes. I've already lived that life. These bracelets mean nothing to me now. Not compared to your future. Sophie pressed her lips together, her tears falling freely as she tucked the bracelets back into her bag. Her eyes glistened with gratitude. Lisa, I'll never be able to repay what you've done for me. But if we ever meet again and you need anything at all, I'll do everything I can for you. That night I sat quietly in the courtyard, letting the spring breeze brush against my face as I waited for the right moment. Caleb came out from his bath, drying his damp hair with a towel. When he saw me smiling at him, he straightened up instinctively. I took the towel from his hand and stood on my toes to dry his hair for him. Our faces were so close that I could feel his breath mingling with mine. The warmth between us deepened until he couldn't hold back anymore. Caleb pulled me tightly into his arms, burying his face in my neck and breathing me in. The masculine scent of his skin made my knees weak. My voice trembled as I whispered, Caleb, can I sleep with you tonight? His dark eyes burned with restrained desire. Without a word, he lifted me into his arms and carried me inside. Embarrassed, I buried my face in his chest. Outside, the spring wind stirred the blossoms, birds chirped restlessly, and the mountains seemed to hum a quiet song of love. When dawn painted the hills crimson, I lay drowsily in Caleb's arms. He gently cleaned away the traces of our night together. My hand trembled as I reached up to touch his face. He turned slightly and kissed the center of my palm before pulling me close again, holding me as we drifted into deep, peaceful sleep. A month later, my sister Hannah came to visit with our mother. My sister-in-law, clearly didn't want to let them in, but for my sake, she reluctantly opened the door. My mother grabbed my hand and sat me down, her tone sugary, but her expression anything but kind. Be a dear and pour us some tea, she ordered. Shot her a cold glare and walked straight back into the house without a word. My mother huffed. Would you look at that attitude? Your sister-in-law's got quite the temper. Anyway, your brother-in-law is doing really well in the city. He's made connections and wants to introduce Nina to a few of his rich friends, but after seeing how rude she is, I don't think I'll bother. My face darkened. An uneasy feeling began to gnaw at my chest. From my mother's words, I learned that Brandon Lee had gone to the city with a few men from the village. There, he'd met a powerful businessman and started working with him. The two of them had made quick profits, doubling, even tripling their capital in no time. At first, I found it strange, but when my mother mentioned the man's name, Kevin Hughes, my heart dropped. In my previous life, Brandon had met Kevin, too. They teamed up in shady illegal deals and made a small fortune until Sophie's brother had them arrested and thrown in jail. That had been the beginning of Brandon's downfall. But this time, everything was happening faster. My sister's blind encouragement had pushed Brandon straight into Kevin's orbit much earlier than before. I didn't even know if Sophie had found her family yet. And if she hadn't, would Brandon repeat his same mistake all over again? I calmly lifted my teacup and took a slow sip, deciding to say nothing. Hannah, sitting across from me, smirked proudly. "What's wrong, Lisa? Jealous already? Too bad I was born lucky. Brandon's got the look of a man destined for greatness. Unlike your pig farmer husband. You and your children will be raising pigs for the rest of your lives." I set my cup down and met her gaze coolly. "If Brandon's really making that much money in the city," I asked, "why hasn't he sent for you yet?" Her smile froze on her lips. I leaned back, my tone light but cutting. "That's what I thought. Making money in the city isn't as easy as it sounds. There are plenty of pretty women in the city," I said calmly, looking straight at Hannah. "Are you sure you can keep your husband's heart?" I could tell my words struck a nerve. Hannah's expression stiffened. A few days earlier, one of the men from our village who had gone to the city with Brandon Lee had returned home drunk in the middle of the night. While rambling, he accidentally called out another woman's name. His wife, furious and humiliated, made a huge scene. Not long after, that same woman was seen crying to her friends in the village. "My husband, he doesn't even touch me anymore," she sobbed. "At first I thought he was just tired, but now I realize he's giving all his wages to someone else out there. When he finally comes home, he's exhausted. And the way he touches me now, I can tell he's learned a few new tricks from some witch in the city." The other women shook their heads in sympathy. "Men are all the same," one said. "When they're poor, they're obedient. Once they have money, they turn rotten." Hannah sat nearby, listening in silence, her heart pounding with unease. She didn't love Brandon. She never had. But she couldn't stand the thought of anyone else stealing what she believed she'd earned. She had suffered with him when he was broke. She deserved to enjoy the wealth that was supposed to come after. She told herself that no other woman had the right to sit in comfort and eat golden rice while she had done all the struggling. A few days later, as I passed by my old house, I saw my mother pressing a bundle of money wrapped in red cloth into Hannah's hands. It was her entire savings. "My dear," she said gently, "don't make things too hard on yourself in the city. Buy whatever you want. As long as you're happy, I'll be happy." Hannah didn't even pretend to be polite. She took the bundle without hesitation, her tone cold and distant. "All right, once I've settled down, I'll come back for you." My mother's eyes brightened instantly. "I always knew it. Between my two daughters, you're the only one who's truly kind and filial. That ungrateful Lisa. She wouldn't even lend Caleb's money to help Brandon's business. Raising her was a waste, a snake in our own sleeves." They chatted for a long while, completely unaware that I was standing nearby. Only when I turned to leave did I finally let out a quiet laugh. "So Hannah's the filial one now. Fine. Then the unfilial daughter won't be the one caring for you when you're old." After that, I devoted myself to helping Caleb plan our next move. Together, we decided it was time to expand beyond the village. I convinced him to hire a manager to look after the pigs so we could take the money and start a business in the city. When my mother heard about it, she stormed into our yard, shouting curses at the top of her lungs. "You think the city's made of gold or something? You just can't stand seeing my son-in-law making money, can you? You people want a piece of everything. When you lose it all, don't you dare come begging him for help." Na, who had been sitting in the courtyard doing her homework, stood up without a word. She grabbed a basin of dirty water and dumped it right on my mother. My mother shrieked as the filthy water drenched her from head to toe, then started screaming even louder, hurling the vilest insults she could think of. The noise brought Caleb out from the back of the house, holding a wooden stick in one hand. The moment my mother saw him, she screamed again and bolted, slipping out of her shoes as she ran. After that, things finally quieted down. Once everything at home was settled, Caleb and I officially began our plan. He was a practical man, experienced in trading and farm work, and he quickly recognized that I had a knack for business. Without hesitation, he broke open his old piggy bank, a clay jar he'd been saving in for over 10 years. I laughed teasingly. "Aren't you afraid I'll lose it all?" He smiled back. "If the money's gone, I'll earn more. As long as you're happy, every cent is worth it." Then he took my hand, his gaze warm and steady. "Besides, the woman I chose will make everything she touches perfect." When Na overheard that, she shivered dramatically. I didn't know my big brother could say such cheesy things." I squeezed Caleb's hand, smiling. "If I have a husband who's kind and willing to share every hardship with me, then I'll devote everything I have to repay him." With Caleb's full support, we decided to invest everything we owned. Using his entire savings, he helped me rent 2 prime storefronts at the largest wholesale market in the city. One to use as storage and the other as a showroom for retail and bulk sales. Life in the city was changing. People no longer worried only about food and clothes. Under the influence of Hong Kong movies, they had started caring about appearance and fashion. The timing couldn't have been better. Caleb handed me 100,000 yuan as startup capital, and I used a few thousand more to pay the rent on those 2 shops. Our new life was about to begin. I redecorated the store and found a garment factory with excellent workmanship. Using the knowledge from my previous life, I gave the factory owner several clothing design sketches. Mr. Truong, the owner, was a seasoned veteran in the textile business. He examined my drawings carefully, then looked up in surprise. Several of my designs were almost identical to the outfits worn by the heroine in a popular Hong Kong film that had just taken the market by storm. He immediately realized how well these pieces would sell once released. Without hesitation, he called in his tailor to make samples. Since there was no model available, I had to step in myself. When I put on a red floral dress and stood before Caleb, his face flushed deep red. He didn't even dare to look directly at me. Mr. Truong, ever the opportunist, quickly snapped a few photos of me and said they'd make perfect promotional images for the shop. I still had some money left, and as it happened, it was graduation season. I decided to hire several beautiful art students as models for the store. They wore the latest designs I'd created, turning my small shop into a live fashion display. As the other clothing stalls sat empty, my storefront was buzzing with customers. Retailers came to buy wholesale, and the moment they saw the girls in my clothes, they placed orders without hesitation. Within weeks, business exploded. I had to hire 3 more employees just to handle packaging and shipping. In less than 6 months, my designs had become famous throughout the city, bringing in profits worth millions of yuan. But I didn't want to stop at wholesaling. I wanted to build my own brand. Every cent I earned went into expanding the business. I rented prime space in one of the city's busiest shopping centers, 1 unit for storage and the other as a showroom for direct sales. Even Nina, who had moved to the city for her studies, came to visit. One day she asked me, "So what are you going to call your brand?" I thought for a moment before answering, "Diana Grace." A year later, I visited one of our flagship stores to check on operations and accidentally walked into a commotion. A well-dressed, arrogant woman was standing in the middle of the store, ordering a young employee to kneel and help her put on her shoes. A crowd had gathered to watch. The poor girl's head hung low under their stares. The woman pulled out a thick wad of cash and threw it at the employee's face. "Aren't customers supposed to be gods to people like you?" she sneered. "Here, this should be enough for you to call me mother, shouldn't it?" The young woman trembled, fighting back tears. The store manager hurried over, picked up the scattered bills and tried to smooth things over. "We're terribly sorry, ma'am. It's our fault for not managing our staff properly." Then turning to the employee, she barked, "What are you standing there for? If you can't do your job, you can leave. This store pays the highest wages in the city. There are plenty of people waiting to take your place." The girl's lips quivered. She didn't want to lose her job, so she knelt down, reaching out a shaking hand toward the woman's shoes. Before her fingers could touch them, a pale hand reached out and stopped her. She looked up and met my eyes. Her face froze in surprise. I helped her to her feet and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. The manager recognized me instantly and went pale. "Mrs. Wright, I'm so sorry," she stammered. "The new employee refuses to follow instructions." She doesn't want to work. The young woman burst into tears. I came here to work, not to be someone's servant. They make me buy coffee during lunch breaks, and whenever there's a difficult customer, they push me forward to deal with them. I'm human too. Why does she get to trample on my dignity? The manager let out a sharp, cold laugh. Dignity? You're an employee. Once you work here, you do what you're told. And if you make this store lose money, you'll have to work half a month for free to make up for it. The girl sobbed harder. The manager sighed, then turned to me apologetically. Young people these days are too sensitive, Mrs. Wright. Don't worry, I'll handle it. I glanced at my watch. You have 10 minutes, I said calmly, to print a resignation letter. Fill it out and bring it to me. The girl's face went white. The manager shouted. Well, what are you waiting for? Do you have any idea how valuable the director's time is? The girl lowered her head and began to turn away, covering her face in shame, but I stopped her. Facing the manager's aggressive tone, I stayed perfectly calm. This store is a place for people to work, not to be enslaved, I said coldly. And from what I've seen, your attitude toward your employees is a problem. If you won't resign yourself, I'll have HR terminate your employment through proper channels. The manager's jaw dropped. Mrs. Wright, you must be mistaken. I was only doing this for the good of the company. I looked at her steadily. Every person is a human being first and an employee second. No matter how successful a business is, if it doesn't treat its workers like family, it will never last. That's something you clearly haven't learned. Turning to the trembling salesgirl, I handed her a tissue. Other companies might treat employees like dogs, but not mine. A staff member who feels humiliated can't serve customers well. Respect is the foundation of everything here. No one is above anyone else. When I finished speaking, the young woman began to cry again. To my surprise, tears welled in the manager's eyes too. She suddenly fell to her knees, begging me not to fire her, sobbing about her little daughter at home who was crying for food. I frowned slightly. When your daughter grows up and starts working, would you want her to have a boss like you? The manager's lips trembled, but she couldn't say a word. Of course not. No one wants their own child to suffer the injustice they inflict on others. Just then a sharp, incredulous voice called out from behind me. Lisa, is that really you? I turned toward the sound and froze. The arrogant woman who had caused the entire scene, her face now taut and unnaturally smooth from too many surgeries, was Hannah. Her sharp chin and overly plump lips made her almost unrecognizable, but I could never mistake those eyes. She stared at me in disbelief. It can't be you. You're the owner of Diana Grace. I smiled lightly. That's right. I am. Her eyes flashed with fury and humiliation. Even after all these years, she hadn't forgotten what she had done to me or how I had died because of her and Brandon Lee. You think just because you own a clothing brand you're better than me? She hissed. Don't delude yourself, Lisa. You'll never be on the same level as my husband. I lifted a brow, my tone mild. Oh, don't worry. I wouldn't dare compare myself to your husband. I run a legitimate business. I'd never stoop that low. Enough, she snapped, cutting me off. Let's not talk about the past. I only came here because my friend said your clothes were nice. But now that I see them, they're nothing special. With that, she flicked her hair, twisting her surgically altered waist. She'd even had ribs removed to look slimmer and strutted out of the store. I watched her leave, wondering silently when Sophie's brother would finally gather enough evidence to bring down Brandon and his criminal ring. Kevin Hughes, the so-called businessman Brandon worked with, had set up an elaborate scam operation in the south of the city. They targeted naive college students, luring them in with promises of high-paying jobs, then forcing them to make phone calls to scam money from the elderly. It was a despicable business built entirely on deceit and greed. In my previous life, Brandon had only played a middleman role and ended up serving a few years in prison after cooperating with the police. But this time, under Hannah's ruthless manipulation, he climbed to the second-in-command position in the entire operation. If Sophie's brother could collect enough evidence, both Hannah and Brandon would face the death penalty. A few years later, Hannah would still show up at my stores, dragging along her equally obnoxious friends to cause trouble. But the timid young employee she once bullied wasn't so timid anymore. She'd taken up boxing. The last time Hannah came in, the girl flexed her toned arms and gave her such a cold glare that Hannah and her friends turned pale. They left in a hurry. After all, breaking one of their expensive implants would cost a fortune. By 2002, Caleb came home from taking our daughter to school, bringing incredible news. Sophie's brother's undercover agent had finally gathered all the proof needed. Police had raided the operation and arrested everyone involved. At that very moment, Hannah was undergoing her 10th nose surgery. When the sentence was read, death, she still had gauze on her face. That evening, I took my entire family out to the finest restaurant in the city to celebrate. Not out of vengeance, but to honor the memory of the woman I used to be, the one Hannah had destroyed long ago. Later that night, I heard that my mother had broken down crying when she found out about Hannah's execution. My mother came all the way from the countryside to the city, causing chaos at the entrance of my store. Even though Sophie's sister, Yvonne, who had trained herself into a strong, muscular woman, could have easily thrown her out, she didn't dare touch an old lady. So, trembling with frustration, she called me for help. When I arrived, I saw my mother sitting on the ground in front of the store, her hair completely white. She had apparently spent the entire night there, wailing pitifully for everyone to hear. "My younger daughter is so ungrateful," she cried. "Her sister's in trouble, and she refuses to help. She's a rich businesswoman now, spends millions every day. But she won't even save her own sister's life." The gathered crowd whispered among themselves, thinking that Hannah must be dying of cancer and that I, her wealthy, heartless sister, was refusing to help. "What kind of person is she?" one woman muttered. "I used to love shopping here, but this is disgusting." "Yeah," another added, pulling out her phone. "Someone record this. Let's post it online. People should know what kind of person owns Diana Grace. Making millions and still won't save her own family. Shame on her. Everyone should boycott this brand." Yvonne saw me approaching and immediately rushed over, worried that the angry crowd might hurt me. I walked straight toward my mother. When she tried to slap me, I caught her hand midair and raised my voice. "What exactly did Hannah do, Mom?" I asked. "Or do you really not know she was running an international scam ring?" A hush fell over the crowd. "She tricked innocent people out of their money," I continued, my tone sharp. "Tell me, how am I supposed to save someone like that?" The bystanders' expressions shifted instantly. Some of the scam victims who had gathered nearby began shouting angrily. "So that's it. She was a con artist," one man yelled. "Serves her right. Let her rot in prison. Scammers deserve worse than death." Another spat. Someone muttered that my mother had once tried to kill herself after losing all her money to Hannah's schemes. But my mother didn't seem to care about any of that. Her face twisted in fury. "So what if she was a scammer? She's still your sister. You think you're so good? Why don't you go get plastic surgery to look like her and take her place on death row?" Huh. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Mom," I said quietly, "she's been sentenced to death. And I, your so-called unfilial daughter, donate to charity every year, helping real people in need. Why should I die in her place?" My mother's face went pale with rage, her words choking in her throat. She tried to hit me again, but I stepped aside and let her cry and scream all she wanted. If she wanted to ruin her reputation publicly, so be it. I had told the truth. Anyone who still chose to insult me could live with their own ignorance. Outside, Caleb was waiting with a camera in his hands. Over the years he had become more refined and confident, his hair neatly combed, a pair of gold-rimmed glasses framing his calm, intelligent eyes. He handed me the camera. "I recorded everything," he said quietly. "We should post it online. Might as well turn this drama into free publicity." I took the camera and reviewed the footage carefully, making sure my chin didn't look too round in any of the shots. Then I smiled. "You did a good job, honey." Caleb leaned close and whispered against my ear. "So what's my reward for being such a good husband?" I tugged on his collar, pulled him toward the car and murmured, "Come here. I'll show you." 15 years later, our daughter was accepted into the best high school in the city. As we discussed where to celebrate, a call came from the village. My mother had passed away. The next morning we drove back home to arrange her funeral. We were told that when she died, no one was with her. After the truth about Hannah's crime spread, The villagers had completely shunned her. No one dared visit. It wasn't until her body began to smell that the neighbors finally called the police. I spent a large sum of money renovating our old house and turning it into a small memorial shrine for her ashes. That day, the TV in the corner was replaying the old footage of Hannah's sentencing. I leaned against Caleb's shoulder, my eyes growing misty. "She loved my sister so much," I whispered. "Now she finally has what she wanted. They're together again." Our daughter tugged on my sleeve, begging to return to the city. She said her friends were waiting. I smiled faintly. She was our only child. People had often urged me to have another, saying every child should have a sibling, but I never wanted that. I'd made enough money to last several lifetimes. My daughter would never lack anything. Having another child would only divide the love and fortune I wanted to give her. One was enough. Before we left, I turned back to look at the house that had held 18 years of my childhood. Under the old osmanthus tree, I could almost see my sister again, young and smiling, holding out a clump of mud wrapped in a leaf. "Here," she'd said. "This is your rice." I had pretended to eat it, grinning. "You're so good to me, sis. It's delicious." But the memory shifted. I saw my mother and Hannah whispering together. "The Wright family is wealthy," my mother said. "You must marry Caleb. As for Lisa, she can have Brandon. That girl's too obedient to ever defy me." I closed my eyes and sighed. In the end, time had turned two sisters bound by blood into mortal enemies. I no longer knew whether to blame fate or the fickleness of human hearts. But from this moment on, I decided I would stop carrying the pain. I would live freely and live happily. My mother and sister had both paid the ultimate price for their choices.